Baby, let me tell you something right now. There comes a moment in your life when God is not asking you to fight for people who keep walking away. He's not asking you to chase what keeps rejecting you. He's not asking you to shrink yourself to fit into places you've already outgrown. This season, this moment right here, God is calling you to focus on yourself. Some of you have been praying for peace while holding on to what's been breaking you. You've been asking God for direction while carrying people who were never meant to go where you're going. And you're wondering why you feel tired, drained, confused. Baby, it's because you're trying to take yesterday's connections into tomorrow's assignment. Hear me. When God starts elevating you, He also starts separating you. Stop fighting the separation. Stop questioning the distance. Stop begging someone to stay who was sent only for a chapter, not the whole book. This is your time to focus on yourself and let them go. When God begins to remove people from your life, it is rarely quiet, comfortable, or convenient. It often feels like an emotional earthquake. Subtle at first, then suddenly everything shifts, cracks, and rearranges itself in ways you didn't expect. You start noticing distance where there used to be closeness, silence where there used to be constant noise, misunderstandings where conversations once flowed easily. And your first instinct is to hold on, to tighten your grip, to fix what feels like it's falling apart. But what if the falling apart is actually the falling into place God has been preparing for you all along? What if the people you keep trying to hold on to are the same people blocking the clarity, peace, and direction you've been praying for? There are times when God begins to separate you, not because something is wrong, but because something is growing. You are evolving, shifting, maturing, and elevating spiritually, and not everyone is assigned to that evolution. Some people were never meant to walk every mile of your journey. They were placed in your life for a chapter, a season, a lesson, or a moment that shaped you, stretched you, or strengthened you, but not everyone is meant to stay for the entire story. There are people who were perfect for who you used to be, but cannot handle who you are becoming. Their energy matched your old mindset. Their presence aligned with your old patterns. Their conversations fit your old wounds. But as God begins to renew your mind, heal your heart, and elevate your calling, you start to outgrow what once felt comfortable. And outgrowing is never gentle. It tugs, it pulls, it creates tension. It makes you uncomfortable in familiar places. When God clears your path for the next level, He often begins by creating discomfort in the areas you would have stayed stuck in. That discomfort is divine. That pull is holy. That restlessness is heaven trying to shift you into alignment even before you understand what you're being aligned for. Sometimes God removes people quietly by draining the connection. Conversations become shorter, interactions become forced, and something in you begins to feel like you're walking through a doorway alone. Other times, God removes people dramatically through conflict, exposure, betrayal, or disappointment so deep that it forces you to wake up to truth you were trying to ignore. And though it hurts, though it feels like loss, God is actually protecting you from delays, from distractions, from detours that would have slowed you down or broken you at a more critical point in your journey. What feels like rejection is often redirection. What feels like abandonment is often preservation. What feels like loss is often divine pruning for future abundance. You may not realize it, but some people in your life were only there because of who you were, not who God is calling you to be. They connected to your struggle, not your strength. They connected to your wounds, not your wisdom. They connected to your brokenness, not your breakthrough. And now that you're healing, now that you're growing, now that you're becoming more whole and more aware of your calling, they can no longer access you in the same way. And instead of chasing them, instead of questioning yourself, instead of shrinking your light to make them comfortable, you must recognize the spiritual truth. God is clearing your path, not to leave you alone, but to prepare you for alignment with people who match the level he is elevating you to. When God begins to move you forward, he cannot allow everyone to come with you. Some people carry the mindset of your past that would sabotage your future. Some friendships were rooted in trauma, and now that you're healing, the foundation can't support where God is taking you. Some relationships were built on versions of you that no longer exist, and the moment you grow beyond those versions, the connection naturally breaks. That breaking is not your failure. It is your evolution. It is God's protection. It is heaven reorganizing your circle to match your calling rather than your comfort. God knows what you cannot see. He sees motives you weren't aware of. He hears conversations behind your back that never reach your ears. He knows who would betray you at the wrong moment, who would discourage you when you need faith, who would pull you backward when you are fighting to move forward. God removes people not because they are bad, but because they are not aligned with your next level. Some connections become spiritual restraints without you even realizing it. Their influence pulls you down subtly. Their energy drains you without explanation. Their presence keeps you playing small so they can feel big. And when God has plans for you that require boldness, discipline, obedience, and clarity, he will not allow you to stay surrounded by people who keep you spiritually suppressed. Often God clears your path by disrupting your preferences. The people you would have picked to stay, he allows to walk away. The people you thought you needed, he shows you were only temporary. The people you assumed would celebrate your growth become silent, distant, or even resentful. And though it confuses you at first, this process is necessary for your elevation. Not everyone has the capacity to cheer for you at the next level. Not everyone can handle the weight of your calling, the light of your transformation, or the power of your purpose. Some people were there only to witness your beginning, not your becoming. The separation is not punishment. It is preparation. Whenever God is about to bless you, he reorganizes your life. He trims relationships the way a gardener trims branches to make room for healthier growth. He removes the voices that would distract you from his voice. He silences the noise so you can hear his direction. He isolates you not to break you, but to build you, to strengthen you, to deepen your character, and to sharpen your discernment. Elevation requires clarity, and clarity requires the removal of clutter. That clutter is sometimes people who once aligned with your past but cannot align with your future. You must understand that divine separation feels painful because your heart remembers what your spirit is ready to release. The emotional attachment remains, but the spiritual assignment has ended. That tension is where many people get stuck. They confuse familiarity with destiny. They cling to what feels known, even when God is pushing them into something new. But when God is clearing your path, he will keep creating situations that push you forward. He will keep removing what drains you. He will keep exposing what no longer serves your journey, because if he allowed those connections to stay, they would weigh you down just as you are preparing to rise. When God removes someone, he is making room for growth, room for healthier relationships, room for purposeful connections, room for mentors who will elevate you instead of draining you, room for opportunities that require a more evolved version of you. God will not elevate you while allowing you to carry people who cannot survive at the altitude he's calling you to. Some relationships cannot breathe at the height of your next season. The air is thinner where you're going. The vision is clearer where you're going. The calling is heavier where you're going. And God will not let you fall because of who you insist on taking with you. You may wonder why it suddenly feels like people are misunderstanding you, pulling away from you, or no longer connected to where your heart is. It's because God is shifting your identity, renewing your mind, and preparing you for something greater than the environment you've been in. You are not who you used to be. You are stepping into a higher level of maturity, faith, purpose, and inner strength. And the people who cannot recognize this version of you were never meant to walk with this version of you. Divine alignment requires divine removal. Not everyone can stay. Not everyone should stay. God is preparing you for what he already sees in your future. He's ensuring your circle matches your calling, ensuring your environment matches your growth, ensuring your relationships support the direction he's taking you. He is clearing your path, not to empty your life, but to elevate it, not to strip you, but to strengthen you, not to isolate you permanently, but to reposition you for the people and opportunities designed to meet the future version of you that is unfolding even now. Focusing on yourself is not a selfish act. It is an act of spiritual obedience, a sacred responsibility to honor the calling that God placed inside you long before anyone else had an opinion about your life. There comes a moment when God pulls you inward, draws you closer, and begins to shift your attention from the noise around you to the voice within you. And that voice, that inner pull, that divine whisper is telling you it's time to prioritize your healing, your growth, your purpose, your mental peace, your spiritual alignment, and your emotional well-being. You have spent so much of your life pouring into people who never poured back. You have carried others through storms they created. You have rescued people who left you empty. You have loved deeply, given endlessly, sacrificed repeatedly, and somehow convinced yourself that taking care of you was the least important thing on the list. But God is calling you to break that pattern. God is calling you to step into a season where you choose you, where you honor the vessel he gave you, where you stop apologizing for taking up space, where you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, and where you stop abandoning yourself to keep relationships alive that were already spiritually dead. There are seasons when God says, daughter, son, I need you to sit with yourself. Not with the version you pretend to be, not with the mask you've been wearing, not with the image you try to uphold, but with the real you, the tired you, the healing you, the evolving you, the questioning you, the hopeful you, the wounded you, the transforming you. When God calls you inward, he is trying to strengthen what life has weakened. He is trying to correct what pain distorted. He is trying to rebuild what trauma shattered. He is trying to renew what sorrow drained. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot fight the battles God assigned to you if you're still fighting to save people he never asked you to save. Focusing on yourself is the divine reset your spirit has been praying for, but your habits have been resisting. Sometimes the reason focusing on yourself feels uncomfortable is because you were trained to equate self-care with selfishness. You were conditioned to think that saying no means you're ungrateful, that creating boundaries makes you unloving, that prioritizing your mental health means you're dramatic, that pulling back from draining relationships means you're cold. But none of that is true. The enemy will always try to make you feel guilty for choosing what God is blessing. He will try to convince you that keeping toxic connections is noble, that caring others is holy, that losing yourself is part of love. But God never asked you to sacrifice your identity for anyone's comfort. God never asked you to dim your light so others wouldn't feel insecure. God never asked you to break yourself trying to fix what was never your assignment. When you focus on yourself, you are not stepping out of alignment, you are stepping into it. The focus on yourself is to honor the sacred work God is doing within you. It is to make space for healing, space for clarity, space for growth, space for revelation, and space for the divine upgrades he is trying to release into your life. You cannot grow if you are constantly distracted. You cannot evolve if you are constantly managing chaos that is not yours. You cannot step into your calling if you're still trying to drag people who have no intention of evolving with you. God is calling you to take your eyes off who left, off who doesn't support you, off who doesn't understand you, and fix your gaze on what he is building inside you. Because the greatest transformation of your life will happen when you stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for alignment. Focusing on yourself is a declaration of worthiness. It is a bold statement that you finally believe what God has been saying about you all along, that you matter, that your dreams matter, that your healing matters, that your heart matters, that your future matters. You cannot keep living like your life is expendable. You cannot keep treating your own needs as inconveniences. You cannot keep silencing your own voice to amplify someone else's. When God tells you to focus on yourself, He is calling you to reclaim the pieces of you that life tried to scatter. He is calling you to stop giving away your strength to people who misuse it. He is calling you to pull your power back, reclaim your identity, and step fully into the version of you that has been waiting beneath the surface for years. And let's talk about that version of you, the one that's been hidden under fear, under doubt, under responsibility, under expectations, under trauma, under pressure. That version of you, the one God sees clearly even when you don't, is ready to breathe, it's ready to rise, it's ready to bloom. But blooming requires sunlight, nourishment, attention. You cannot grow a garden you refuse to water. God is asking you to water yourself, to feed your soul with things that build you, to rest when your body is tired, to step away when your spirit is anxious, to listen when your heart speaks, to honor your own boundaries even when others get offended. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always be frustrated by your healing. Let them be frustrated. Your growth does not require their approval. As you begin to focus on yourself, you will notice the shifts. You will notice that some people fall away, not because you are doing anything wrong, but because you are no longer available for your own neglect. You will notice changes in conversation, in priorities, in energy. You will start to feel uneasy in places where your spirit used to settle. That discomfort is not a sign to go back. It is a sign that God is pushing you forward. Focusing on yourself will feel lonely at times, not because you are alone, but because God is removing the noise so you can hear Him clearly. He is isolating you for revelation. He is setting you apart so He can pour into you without interruption. Growth often begins in quiet places. Transformation happens in moments the world doesn't witness. What God builds in private becomes undeniable in public. And let me tell you something else. When you focus on yourself, the version of you that emerges will shock people who only knew you in survival mode. Some people know you by your wounds, not your wisdom. They know you by your past, not your potential. They know you by your struggles, not your strength. But focusing on yourself allows God to reintroduce you even to the people who thought they had you figured out. You cannot stay who you were and become who you are called to be. You cannot carry old identities into new seasons. God is shedding the old layers so the true you can finally come forth. Focusing on yourself also requires honesty, the raw, uncomfortable kind. The kind where you look at your patterns and ask why you stay where you're drained, why you give where you're overlooked, why you cling to what God told you to release. You begin to see the ways you have abandoned yourself in the name of loyalty, love, or fear. And instead of condemning yourself, God invites you to heal, to unlearn, to break generational patterns, to choose differently. Self-focus is not selfish, it is spiritually strategic. It positions you for the purpose God intends to birth through you. You are entering a season where you cannot afford to lose yourself again. You cannot afford to silence your calling. You cannot afford to neglect your mental and emotional health. You cannot afford to sacrifice your peace. God has too much planned for you, too much to reveal, too much to build, too much to elevate. And for you to step into all of that, you must be whole, centered, grounded, aligned. You must be present with yourself. You must be intentional with your heart. You must be committed to your growth. Focusing on yourself is not abandonment of others. It is the acceptance of your assignment. It is choosing to become the person God always intended you to be before life pulled you in 100 directions that were never meant for you. When God begins elevating you, separation becomes a language of heaven. It is not punishment, it is not rejection, it is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is God rearranging the room of your life so that the version of you He is calling forth can finally breathe without being suffocated by the expectations, opinions, and limitations of people who were never meant to walk with you into your next season. Elevation and separation are twins. They arrive together. When God lifts you, He loosens what cannot go higher with you. When God calls you, He clears what would distract you. When God strengthens you, He removes what would weaken you. And often that removal comes in the form of people drifting, relationships shifting, connections fading, conversations shading, and circles shrinking. But this is not a sign that your life is falling apart. It is a sign that your life is being refined for purpose. There is a version of you that cannot rise until the weight around you is lifted. Some people are not weights because they are bad. They are weights because they are misaligned. They carry the energy of who you used to be, not who you are becoming. They connect to your past trauma, but cannot understand your healing. They are comfortable with your smallness, but intimidated by your expansion. They cheer for your survival, but shrink back when you begin to thrive. And God in His infinite wisdom will not allow you to carry people who cannot hold the altitude of your next level. Elevation comes with thinner air, meaning the higher you go, the more pressure you feel, the more responsibility you carry, the more clarity you need, and the more intentional your relationships must become. Not everyone was built for high places. Not everyone can breathe at the height God is taking you to. So when separation begins, it is not a loss. It is God preparing the atmosphere for the elevation He already ordained. Sometimes the separation is loud. A betrayal exposes itself. A disagreement turns into a distancing. A moment of truth reveals someone's real motives. Other times the separation is quiet. People stop calling. The connection feels forced. The bond loses its spark. The energy shifts. You stop feeling understood. You stop feeling supported, you stop feeling spiritually aligned, and you begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? But the real question is, what is God doing right? Because God does not need your permission to protect your purpose. He does not need your comfort to secure your destiny. He will break what is blocking you, even if you never saw it as a blockade. He will end connections you were loyal to because He sees the storms you don't. He will remove people you prayed to keep because He hears conversations you weren't in. And though it hurts, though it confuses you, though it shakes you, elevation demands separation. And the mistake many people make is trying to drag old relationships into new seasons. You cannot step into a new version of yourself while clinging to people who only know the old version. You cannot walk into purpose while entertaining people who drain your spirit. You cannot grow while surrounded by those who fear your growth. Some people loved you because you were wounded, not because you were whole. They were connected to your brokenness, not your breakthrough. And when you begin to heal, some people begin to leave because healing exposes the places where they benefited from your pain. Healing forces roles to shift. Healing changes dynamics. Healing sets boundaries that threaten people who were comfortable crossing them. But you cannot shrink your healing to keep others close. You cannot dim your elevation to preserve someone's comfort. When God elevates you, you must rise, even if rising means rising alone for a season. And let me tell you something, elevation is not glamorous in the beginning. It often feels like isolation. It feels like loneliness. It feels like God is stripping everything familiar away. You look around and realize the people you thought would always be there are suddenly distant. The places you felt comfortable suddenly feel too small. The habits that once soothed you now feel draining. The conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. You begin to feel like you don't fit anywhere because God is transforming you into someone who isn't meant to fit everywhere. Divine elevation changes your appetite. What you crave shifts. What you tolerate decreases. What you value deepens. And because of that, your circle must shift with you. God is not trying to isolate you. He is trying to refine you so he can release you into greater levels of purpose, influence, clarity, and spiritual maturity. Separation is not always about removing people who are bad. Sometimes it is about removing people who are simply not built for where you are going. Good people can be wrong for your destiny. Loyal people can still limit your calling. Familiar people can still block your growth. Some friendships were never designed to last forever, just long enough to get you through a certain season. The problem is we often get attached to the temporary and try to make it permanent. But when God elevates you, he has to prune. Pruning is painful but necessary. Pruning removes branches that would have kept you from bearing fruit. Pruning removes relationships that would have left you stagnant. Pruning removes environments that would have constrained your potential. And though pruning feels like losing, it is actually making room for increase. Your elevation demands discernment. You must learn to recognize when a season has expired, when a connection has completed its assignment, when a relationship has outlived its alignment. Many of the people you outgrow will try to make you feel guilty for your growth. They'll accuse you of changing, of acting different, of distancing yourself. But they are correct. You are changing. You are becoming. You are evolving, and God never called you to stay the same to keep others comfortable. Growth requires change. Elevation requires transformation. Destiny requires difference. Stop apologizing for what God is doing within you. Stop explaining your elevation to people who refuse to evolve. Stop lowering your standards to make room for relationships God already removed. There are moments when God forces separation so he can speak to you directly. When too many voices surround you, his voice becomes harder to hear. When too many expectations weigh on you, his direction becomes harder to follow. So God clears the noise. He quiets the distractions. He isolates your spirit so he can guide your steps. This period of separation becomes a classroom. It becomes a training ground, becomes a cocoon where he shapes you privately for what he will reveal publicly. And though you may feel lonely, you are not alone. God is with you, refining your vision, strengthening your identity, healing your heart, and preparing you for what is next. Elevation also requires courage because separation demands you let go of what is familiar, familiar pain, familiar patterns, familiar people, familiar places, familiar coping mechanisms. Stepping into elevation means trusting God when he pulls you away from comfort. And trust is not always easy. It feels like walking into the unknown. It feels like stepping onto water. But every elevation in Scripture began with a separation. Abraham had to leave his home. Joseph had to leave his family. David had to leave the pasture. Jesus had to leave the crowds to pray. Separation precedes revelation. Revelation precedes elevation. God separates you to reveal you. God reveals you to elevate you. And here's something many people overlook. Sometimes God does not remove people because they are wrong. He removes them because they are limited. They cannot see the greatness inside you. They cannot perceive the calling on your life. They cannot imagine the level of impact God is preparing you for. Their vision is too small to hold your destiny. Their mindset is too narrow to support your growth. You know, their faith is too weak to stand with you in spiritual battles. So God pulls you away, not because they hate you, but because they can't handle the weight of the next version of you. You are being elevated to a level where your conversations must deepen, your circle must strengthen, and your environment must support your calling. The higher God takes you, the more intentional you must become about who you allow access to your heart, your mind, your energy, and your vision. Not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone deserves influence in your life. Elevation requires boundaries. Boundaries protect your purpose. Boundaries protect your peace. Boundaries protect your calling. And some people will walk away the moment you set them, but let them walk. Their departure is confirmation, not loss. You will reach a point in your elevation where you finally understand why God had to separate you. You will look back and realize some people would have talked you out of blessings. Some people would have discouraged you from opportunities. Some people would have sabotaged your confidence. Some people would have poisoned your spirit. Some people would have pulled you backwards out of fear that you might surpass them. Separation was God's protection. Separation was God's preparation. Separation was God's strategy. Elevation requires clarity, and clarity often comes through removal. Once the wrong people are gone, the right doors begin to open. Once the distractions fade, the direction becomes clear. Once your spirit is quiet, God's voice becomes louder, and you begin to see that everything you lost was making room for everything you are gaining. You begin to understand that God wasn't taking from you. He was clearing the runway so you could finally take off. Elevation is God trusting you with more influence, more responsibility, more purpose, more wisdom, more spiritual power. But He cannot trust you with more if you are still surrounded by people who cannot steward the blessing with you. Your circle must match your calling. Your environment must support your evolution. Your relationships must reflect your growth. And when they don't, God steps in and separates. The truth is, the people who left were never meant to hold the weight of the future God is building around you. Their absence is not an empty space. It is a divine opening. It is a doorway for new connections, new opportunities, new mentors, new environments, new spiritual alignments. You are stepping into a season where everything attached to you must grow, must align, must elevate, and anyone who cannot rise with you must release you. When you keep carrying people who were only assigned to your past season, your spirit begins to feel the weight long before your mind understands what's happening. You start to sense that something feels off, something feels heavy, something feels misaligned, and you can't explain it to anyone because they're not living in your calling. They're not hearing what God whispered to you, and they're not feeling the shift God is creating inside you. You try to make it make sense. You try to adjust. You try to be the strong one, the giving one, the understanding one, but deep down you know you're dragging something behind you that can't go where God is taking you. And the more you try to carry them, the more your peace fights back. The more your spirit grows restless. The more you feel that quiet nudge telling you that you're not being disloyal to them, you're being disloyal to yourself. You start realizing that you've been walking into rooms where your light is too bright for people who prefer the dim. You've been shrinking your power so they don't feel insecure. You've been minimizing your growth so they don't call you different. You've been pausing your transformation because they're comfortable staying the same. And instead of celebrating where God is taking you, they start tugging on you, pulling you backward, reminding you of who you used to be instead of respecting who you're becoming. Carrying people like that feels like dragging an anchor tied to your promise. And every step forward starts to feel heavier and heavier because their energy, their limitations, and their refusal to grow becomes your burden to bear. You begin noticing that the conversations drain you more than they feed you. You start feeling like you're the only one pouring, the only one supporting, the only one giving, while they keep taking and taking, never realizing that every time they pull from you, something in your spirit grows more tired. You begin to ask yourself why you feel guilty for wanting peace, why you feel wrong for wanting boundaries, why you feel selfish for wanting space to grow. But it's not selfishness, it's spiritual suffocation. Your soul is trying to breathe. Your purpose is trying to stretch. Your calling is trying to rise. But you can rise when you're carrying people who refuse to move. And sometimes the people you're carrying aren't bad people. They're not evil, they're not malicious, they're not intentionally holding you back, but they are committed to the version of you that God is trying to deliver you from. They are accustomed to your former patterns, your former struggles, your former insecurities, your former ways of thinking. They bonded with the you that lived in survival mode, not the you that is stepping into purpose. So when God begins to elevate your mind, elevate your heart, elevate your understanding, they start feeling uncomfortable, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something different. And instead of rising with you, they try to hold you where they last recognized you. You feel the tension, you feel the tug, you feel the spiritual mismatch, and yet you keep trying to carry them, thinking loyalty means staying bound, thinking love means overextending, thinking connection means sacrificing your growth. But the truth is, loyalty without wisdom becomes self-destruction. Love without boundaries becomes depletion. Connection without purpose becomes confinement. And God didn't call you to live confined. He didn't call you to stay stuck. He didn't call you to spend your life shrinking yourself so someone else can feel comfortable. When God gives you vision, he also gives you separation.